Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Kyle Bahr, legal product lead at Udia, whose practical approach to legal AI helps lawyers transform their practice while rekindling their childlike wonder that makes technology truly exciting. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host. I'm really excited to have Kyle Bahr on the show today. He is the legal AI strategy lead and senior business attorney at Luther Lenard. And he has been involved in a lot. He's actually a pretty top voice on LinkedIn in terms of legal AI. And I'm really excited to have him on the show. Kyle, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to now.
Thanks so much, Tom. And it's great to be able to speak with you and the LawDroid Manifesto audience. My name's Kyle Bahr. Like you said, in my role right now, I wear two hats at a boutique law firm that has a nationwide practice, and we focus on representing the franchisees in a franchise relationship. So think about your typical fast food restaurant. There's the franchisor, who's the corporate headquarters and runs the franchise, and then the various small business owners, or maybe even larger business owners who own the individual locations. They're the franchisees, and we represent them. So we represent business owners in the transactional side of our practice, as well as the dispute side, which is where I tend to sit because of my background. And it's a wonderful experience, both representing these folks in the practice of law, but also now using generative AI and other innovations in my practice on the daily basis, figuring out how to best leverage this technology, as well as figure out how to leverage the technology into the workflows of the entire practice for the firm for the benefit of the lawyers in the firm, as well as most importantly, our clients.
And Kyle, that's really one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you is because I follow you. I see your posts, and you're doing such an amazing job of like communicating how to really use this stuff. And I think for a lot of people, it still remains a little abstract. And I think the way you bring it home is really useful,
Yeah.
and obviously much appreciated. You get a ton of engagement and activity.
Yeah, that's right. I come at the technology from a practical perspective first. When I discovered AI, when ChatGPT first came out, December of 2022, I was in-house counsel at that time, and I was really focused on how can I implement this technology into my practice, and then more broadly into the practice of my legal department. And my career has really taken a pivot into legal AI because of that discovery and because of the capabilities that the technology showed me right away in my day-to-day practice. And it's only gotten better, and my growth curve with the technology has gone up as well. And at this point now, I'm able to do very exciting things that just blow me away sometimes. Even this past weekend, I was working on something, and it just blew my mind at the capability of a particular model to do very high-level strategic legal work.
And I want to keep that as a teaser that we're going to get back
Yeah.
later on for all your listeners and watchers there. And by the way, Kyle has a pretty unique perspective. He worked at the Association of Corporate Counsel before, so like gives him a broader view of how this stuff is used.
I didn't work for the ACC, but I was the Western Pennsylvania chapter of the ACC, the legal ops liaison for them. This was last year, so 2024,
Yeah.
where I was our chapter representative at the Legal Ops Con in Chicago, and also spoke about AI and using AI to help with storytelling, getting your message across to potentially like folks in the C-suite, other stakeholders within an in-house or within a corporate organization.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, from that point of view, it's not solely within like one particular firm. Like you're looking at more broadly, like what is the use case for in-house counsel, corporate use of it, and you kind of have to look at it with a broader view. And so I think that's uh, you know, really informative for people that are tuning in because I think we get caught up in our own little islands of our experimentation, and maybe we try it once and it doesn't work according to our expectations, but to know how other people are using it within the same practice area or within the same kind of context, like in-house, right? um, there's a lot to learn from that. And you also
Yeah,
want,
and
yeah.
and I've learned a lot from you, Tom, about the general nature of this technology. You and I connected early on in my journey in early 2023. And I've learned a lot from you. And one thing just recently, a concept that you had said before, but you repeated again recently, I forget, in an article or maybe on one of the podcasts, was the concept of GPT, not chat GPT, generative pre-trained transformer, but general purpose technology. And AI, generative AI now is a general purpose technology. And so even though I come at it right now from a boutique law firm, typically litigator side perspective, or I'm using it there, the technology is so general, it has such versatility that it can be used really in any context.
Yeah, it is getting kind of crazy, and I definitely want to get to that. But as with all these interviews, I want to go back to the beginning. And so you're in Pittsburgh now. Did you grow up there?
No, I didn't grow up in Pittsburgh. I've lived all over the country. Started out in Maine. That's where I was born. I was born into an Air Force family. So my dad was the commander of a radar base on the coast of Maine, way up near Canada. That base doesn't exist anymore. Um, Eventually, we made our way down when I was very young to Virginia. So I don't remember Maine at all. We left for uh, before I could really remember it. We went down to Virginia, to the Tidewater area of Virginia. Eventually, my folks split up, and I moved with my mom to where she grew up, the Bay Area of California. And so, 4 years old, went across the country with her, and we wound up living in three different houses in California, starting off living with my grandma in the Bay Area. But then we wound up moving up to parts of California that most people don't even think of. Most people's concepts of California kind of stops at Sacramento, but there's a whole bunch more California up north of that on the way up to Oregon. And we lived up in very rural Northern California, a small town that didn't even have a stoplight, to be close to my mom's brother, my uncle. And it was there that my mom met my stepdad, my dad, who we have a great relationship with. So I lived with a single mom at first in way Northern California. And then she met my dad, and we eventually moved in with him after they got married. And along the way, he was a public servant. He worked for the government, for the Forest Service. By the time I was in third grade, we wound up moving up to the Portland, Oregon area, which is really where my roots were planted from the middle of third grade until I graduated from high school. I was up there because he got a promotion and a position up on the Mount Hood National Forest outside of Portland.
What was that experience like moving from place to place? How did that affect you? Like, do you think it gave you a different perspective than you would have had otherwise?
Yeah, I think so. I think that by having to move around so much and have so much change in my life, I had to adapt quickly to a lot of different situations, including when I would go see my biological dad. I would, I was a one of those unaccompanied minors on flights to go see him when he was living back in Virginia. Also, he got transferred through the Air Force to Florida and then to Texas. So I would constantly be shifting my perspective, shifting my context, trying to figure out how to fit in at different places. I changed schools several times, including in the middle of third grade, moving from California to Oregon. And I think having that sort of experience early on in my life and trying to figure out how to fit in different places maybe made me a little bit more open to change and made me more adaptable. And now that maybe the phrase is agile, have an agile mentality because that was ingrained in me early on.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
No, I'm an only child. It could have done a couple things for me, but because I was able to, in all these changes, be able to meet people and make friends, all of that could have been, I think, very enclosing for me, making all these changes. But because I was able to reach out and make friends quite quickly, it allowed me to have essentially siblings, like very close friends at all the different places that I went. And I still keep in touch with a lot of folks who I grew up with, who I was especially close with, which is, it's nice. But it could have worked another way if my personality wasn't like that. Then, and I don't think it's a good or bad thing, but my personality, maybe if it was different, I would have been more enclosed in myself. I am quite often. People talk about, extrovert versus introvert. I'm very much an introvert. Like I get energy from myself and I need to be able to recharge and get away from folks sometimes. I think that's because of my upbringing and being an only child. But I I find that I'm able to get a lot out of interacting with other people because that was a necessity for me when I was young.
Well, we have that in common. I was an only child too, and somewhat of
Okay.
an introvert. So, like, I completely get what you're talking about. Um, sometimes if that's our experience, we turn to things that we can get feedback from, interact with. Did you have any early experiences with tech of any kind that you enjoyed playing around with?
I did. I did. My stepfather, my dad, even though we were in this rural town that had no stoplight, and this was in the mid 80s, he had a personal computer. He was a bit of a nerd. We would go to computer swaps. Like we would drive to the nearest big city for us, big city in California was Redding. And we would drive the hour to Redding, California for these computer swaps way back in the day. We had a PC at home and he would let me play around on it. I taught myself how to type. I would play flight simulator games, would play space games, mess around with Microsoft Word, but like super early versions of word processors. I think that's what helped foster my love of writing. Eventually, I became a journalist before I went into law. So the technology the very early technology compared to what we have today that I was able to get exposed to in an unusual environment, rural Northern California, really allowed me to start interacting with technology and understand what technology could do for me. And it was wonderful. I loved it. And I did sports too. I did all sorts of things. I was a pretty well-rounded kid.
So those early experiences with technology, like playing around with computers, like I totally get that, and they really make a good a first impression that I think draws us to it and keeps us in a lifelong relationship with it. I'm curious, you said that your father was doing, he was in forestry, right?
Yeah, that's right. He was a scientist and a hydrologist, a water scientist for the Forest Service.
And what interest did your mom have?
My mom was very interested in health, in public health. She had gone to nursing school. She wound up not finishing nursing school, but she was always involved in health. And so, in fact, in that small town that we lived in, it's called Weaverville. She was the public health inspector and did a lot of stuff for kids' health in this small county, the small community.
So you mentioned that a few times, like, the fact that it had like one stoplight and it was a small community, like
No stoplights.
no stoplight. Sorry. I,
Yeah.
I, I promoted it to having a stoplight.
And it does now, from what I hear. I haven't been back in a while, but
Good, good. Want to prevent those accidents. But the context of that, I mean, I would assume certain things like everyone knew each other, that that people naturally would be fairly friendly from having a small community. Um, is any of that true? Like, how do you think that kind of like living in that has affected you? Like, has that
hmm.
provided you? Like, I would think it'd be a good base, of growing up in a small community like that, because you would have more people around you to learn from, support you, and kind of expand from there. But what was your experience
Yeah,
like?
that's an interesting question, and I think for me, my answer is I was there from preschool until the middle of third grade, until I was 9. Um, and so I don't have much memory of how at least the adults interacted, but we definitely did within the nucleus of my family and the friends of my family. We had a pretty tight knit community. My dad was on the volunteer fire department. And so through that, we knew a lot of adults in town, including we were family friends with my preschool teacher, who I still have a strong relationship with. Hey, Becky. There's a mix of just not having formative memories of my time there. Really, most of my memories come from being in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, and coming up through elementary, middle, and high school there. But certainly having the roots there in a small town and having that experience gives me a perspective of knowing that there's more out there and more of various sizes and people who every day in all sorts of different contexts are trying to do their best for themselves, for their families, for their friends, for their communities. And I think that helps out a lot too, being where I am now in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, larger city. We live out in the suburbs though. And, you know, a lot of people, I used to live in Washington, D.C., right? So I've seen a lot of different contexts of how people live. And there's a lot of common thread and humanity, commonality between all those different places. But sometimes wherever we're living, we kind of focus in on just that. That's our lived experience. And we might be a little bit more um, tunnel vision on this is how I'm living. And so this is how a lot of other people are living. I've had the lived experience of being in a whole lot of different contexts. And so I kind of understand where a lot more people are coming from or trying to come from.
Well, let's jump forward a little bit. Like, so from all of that,
Yeah.
you went on to the University of Pennsylvania and you majored in American history, right?
Yeah, that's right. Majored in American history. I would say, though, that I had an unofficial major in journalism because I spent way more of my time than maybe was healthy as a sports writer and sports editor for our newspaper called the Daily Pennsylvanian. I caught the journalism bug when I was in high school at at a town where I was outside of the Portland, Oregon area, town called Gresham. Had an amazing journalism teacher early in my high school career, Mrs. Owens, and went on and worked for the school newspaper, got some other opportunities in the broader Portland community with working in journalism. I've always been an athlete and also good with words. And so those kind of melded together in sports writing. When I went to Penn, one of my goals was to write for the college newspaper. And we weren't allowed to do it beginning of freshman year, but second semester of freshman year, I was allowed to join up and took that ball and ran with it, which was wonderful. So really, I focused academically on American history, minor in English, but my real major was journalism.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I saw the sports writing early on, and one thing just to acknowledge it, you went across the country, right? I mean, University of Pennsylvania, excellent school, but at the same time, it was quite a leap to, go from Portland to studying in Pennsylvania. What led that? Was it just as most teenagers do, they want to just find yourself? What was your thinking there?
There were two things. One, I didn't get accepted into Stanford, and two, because I'd been born on the East Coast and had some time on the East Coast, there was a kind of a yearning in me to go back east for my education. So I we'd done my junior year, the summer after my junior year of high school, we did the whole East Coast college tour. Penn was the very first campus that I went to. Philly was the very first city that we went to. And I loved Philly and I loved Penn. And that became the standard against which all of the other schools that I looked at was compared against. And none of the others could outperform it. I wanted to be in an urban area different than the suburbia that I was in or the rural area that I'd been in California. So Penn hit that square on the head, and then just an amazing school, amazing opportunity. Like many people today, if I have no idea if I was applying to get in there now, if I'd even have a shot, just because it's so competitive at this point now. But I'm super happy that I was able to get in and do a lot of learning and growth through that experience.
So going back to sports writing,
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like you were an athlete, you had a talent for writing, and then putting the two together, right? Kind of makes sense. Do you think that is there a kind of mindset that being a journalist propagates or creates, or is there a different way of looking at things that you think comes about from being a journalist or having that hat on?
Journalism, to me, after having been in the profession for a little bit and having been, through the amateur ranks of journalism, journalists are like the first line of historians, which again, I was an American history major as well. I mean, they're the ones who are taking down in real time what eventually becomes history. If someone's doing historical research, they're looking at what was in the newspapers back then, what was being said. So the mindset of a journalist is to hopefully, there's some controversy around this, of course, now, but especially with looking at sports journalism, let's put away political journalism and all that stuff. Just looking at sports journalism, we are trying to figure out what is the compelling narrative in any game. What is the thread that is running through whatever is going on with a team that we're covering, and looking at things a little bit more objectively, trying to see the big picture and how maybe this one event or this one player fits into that big picture to help with the broader narrative, to help the readers, the audience, understand the bigger picture through this one little vignette of a game or of a player or of a team.
I could see how that could be really useful, especially right now with everything that's going on, because, it's one thing to use not to jump ahead too much, but it's like one thing to
Mm.
use an AI tool kind of like in a vacuum and gauge whether or not it's useful, but another thing to kind of like see the forest and see where it's going. I'm curious though, like from that to going to law school, you went to William and Mary, and was it because, as for some of us, what am I going to do with this degree? Let's go to law school, or what was your thought process there?
No, my college experience was fully toward journalism. I wanted to be a journalist coming out of school, and I was a journalist coming out of school for a very short period of time. I had the great fortune of working for two small newspapers, but two newspapers that helped move me along in my journey. So I started off professionally at a newspaper that actually isn't around anymore in Alexandria, Virginia, called the Journal. And I got to cover all sorts of really great stuff. It was came off of a summer internship that I had had with this newspaper, kind of going back to all the context switching in my earlier years and all the moves in my earlier years that we had just talked about. When I started college, my folks wound up moving in the middle of my freshman year of college from the West Coast to the East Coast to the DC area. So my roots were picked up and planted in the DC area in Northern Virginia. I started looking for summer internships there instead of back home, quote unquote, in the Portland area. Wound up getting an internship with this newspaper after my freshman year that eventually led to me joining with them professionally after I graduated from college. I covered a wide range of sports, high school sports, college sports, and we had a guy who covered the Washington Redskins. And so I got to shadow along with him on a few things, including going to their training up in Pennsylvania. But that experience and then going to a different newspaper in central Pennsylvania, the York Dispatch and Sunday News, which was because of the editor there, the sports editor there, was kind of a launching ground for really great sports writers who then went on to, I think, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and some other places. Wall Street Journal does have a sports section, by the way, which is interesting. I was on my way upward in the sports writing ranks, I feel, but I started realizing one very important thing. Sports happen in the evenings and on the weekends. And sports writers have to work then evenings and weekends to be covering those events. And I started realizing that that didn't quite equate with what I wanted to do just socially, be able to hang out with my friends on a Saturday night. I would have to finish up covering, like, well, let's say a Friday night. I would have to finish up covering a high school football game, which probably got out. And um, I got my story in to my editor by like 11:30 at night. And then I'd have to turn around with very little money in my pocket because journalists don't get paid very much and go hang out with my friends at the bars in DC after doing that. I realized, I think I'd rather do something where maybe I work a little bit more during the day and then hopefully have a little bit more money in my pocket and be able to hang out with my friends in the evening. So I was having an internal conversation with myself about where my career was going to go. And it came down between teaching and going into the law. And I decided to go into the law.
Well, makes a lot of sense. Got to have some pocket money to enjoy life. And
That's right.
and yeah, those hours sound a bit crazy. Like hard to have a life, a family with weekends and evenings taken. After law school, in getting prepared to interview today, one of the positions he had was as a law clerk, right? And then you worked at a number
Yeah.
of different firms. Like, how did those experiences inform you today? Without going through each one of them, like what were some of the lessons learned from that?
when I made that transition from journalism into law, I worked for 2 years as a legal assistant, a paralegal at Skadden Arps in DC. And that was my first view into, and this was early days, my first view into using technology in legal practice. And we're talking super early days. So using an Excel spreadsheet, getting organized through that while doing hard copy in the warehouse, going through the papers, document review. So I've seen my career in the law started with paper practice and has progressed now to generative AI doing things for us that I'm like blown away constantly as to what it's able to do, and I can only imagine what it's going to be able to do for us in the future. So I've seen that overarching trend in the law toward digitization and now automation, which is fascinating. And that experience at Skadden didn't scare me away from going in and pursuing law school. So I went to William and Mary for law school. Afterward, I was fortunate to be invited to join White and Case in Washington, D.C., practice there. But my now wife, girlfriend, when I was in law school, who's not a lawyer, we met before I went to law school. She was in the Army. She's a physician, and we met when she was at Walter Reed doing her residency and internship for the Army. And the Army, after she finished that up, sent her down to Fort Benning, Georgia, in Columbus. And I knew that for us to be able to be close together, I needed to find something in the Georgia vicinity, and started applying for U.S. District Court clerkships down there. And fortunately, you mentioned that I was a law clerk. I got an amazing opportunity to clerk for 2 years with a U.S. District Judge, Judge Sands, on the Middle District of Georgia. Judge Sands doesn't sit in Columbus. And so my wife, Sarah, and I didn't live in Columbus where her base was. Judge Sands sits in Albany, and we wound up living in a town that's Albany's down here and Columbus is here. We lived kind of a middle point, sort of, in Americus, Georgia, which is, if a very small town can have a suburb, Jimmy Carter lived in the suburb of Americus called Plains. And we actually saw him a couple times in town in Americus. The clerkship with Judge Sands was amazing. Probably the best experience of my legal career. So it happened after I'd already been practicing law for a year, which I think really helped me have some advanced perspective on all of the briefs and motions and everything that were coming into us as law clerks advising the judge. And Judge Sands was the first Black U.S. District Judge in his district. He had amazing perspective on not just the practice of law, but also the practice of law for folks of all different backgrounds in our very rich and diverse country. And that gave me a lot of really good perspective moving onward in my career about how justice should happen and how we should view the law.
It sounds like it was a really inspiring experience, and I completely agree with you. Like, it's such a good thing to see things from different perspectives and to understand where other people are coming from. Having a sense of empathy isn't just, an emotional thing. It's also a way of learning about life in a much richer way. And that's wonderful. I've had some similar experiences, and I totally get how that broadens our view of the world.
One of your taglines for Law Droid, I think, is "Legal Rebels" or something like that, right? What is it?
Yeah, well, I refer to our audience as legal rebels, and
Yes.
yeah.
So we had a little bit of a legal rebel moment that you might enjoy. while we were clerks. There were, I think, three of us at the time. We had a spell where we had two clerks, and then we had three at one point. But the federal government, the judiciary, wanted us all to use Word Perfect.
Yeah.
And it was respectful, but we had a little bit of a rebellion, and we forced things to Microsoft Word, for which we were all very grateful that we
Right.
did.
Fight the power. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, like the next thing is your transition to, more of a focus on legal technology. And, you
Yeah.
had some experience with that, founding a consulting company with legal that you focused on legal AI, also working at Briefcatch for a while. And then
Yeah.
I'm sure some of it was the focus at ACC. If you can just explain a little bit that transition, how it happened, why it happened, like what went on there.
Yeah. So after my wife and I both finished our government service down in Georgia, she grew up in the Pittsburgh area, and we decided to come here in Pittsburgh rather than moving back to DC, which we both love, Washington, DC, but kind of made an adult decision before we even had a family of our own to come be close to her family. I joined with Reed Smith here, practiced as an associate and a senior associate for Reed Smith, both in Pittsburgh and in DC, for I think about 8 years before I went in-house to Wesco Distribution, which is a Fortune 200 company that's based here in Pittsburgh. It's a global company. That is where I really learned about legal operations and technology. I didn't even know it was really a thing. I'd always been a technologist, going all the way back to having that personal computer in small town when I was a kid. At Reed Smith, I was buddies with the IT department, but I was looking to figure out how to leverage technology just for myself rather than for the group, the betterment of the group. When I joined up with Wesco, I was given a task almost right off the bat to help digitize one of our litigation processes, the legal hold process. And that was a successful rollout of new technology. And that let me know that I had really some skills, some competency when it comes to legal tech and technology and operations. When ChatGPT hit the scene, I had already started with a tech-enabled legal department initiative and had been training my colleagues on things like how to use the M365 stack better. And this was in the context of we were all remote at this point from the pandemic, right? So
Yeah.
trying to figure out how the rest of the team, including myself, can better use technology in these unprecedented times that we found ourselves in. Through my growth with AI, not just ChatGPT, but then like I got off the wait list for Claude by Anthropic in middle of 2023 and had started doing some really amazing things with it in the litigation context. I just realized that I wanted to be able to reach out to even more people in our legal community about this technology and help people grasp how to harness it. And so after 5.5 years at Wesco, I decided to leave, start my own consultancy called Sea Change Legal Ops, because I feel like we really are in a sea change right now. I was able, fortunately, to connect with some really great customers and clients in both in-house and in law firms and help them begin to understand. And this was, late 2023, early 2024, help them understand how this technology can be put to work for them. And that led to a really great opportunity to join up, like you said, with Briefcatch, which for those of you who don't know, it's founded by Ross Guberman, who I had a relationship with. He, as the legal writing pro, he's a legal writing guru. Back in '07 and '08, he came to White and Case and taught us as summer associate and junior associate classes how to improve our legal writing. which of course, given my writing background, my journalism background, I really connected with what Ross was talking about, and he and I had connected and had been in touch over the years. So he invited me to come join up with Briefcatch, which is a legal writing tool mainly for litigators, but also for transactional folks. That is a Word add-on. I did work for them. I was a product manager for Ross and um, the chief operations officer, Jim Brock, who's amazing. I learned a ton from them and the team's engineers and sales folks and just everybody on the team about how to develop and sell legal technology. I was there for about 6 months and I felt like I got 3 years worth of training. It was like a master's degree plus from what seemed like a short time. Really great opportunity. And I got to work directly with machine learning and natural language processing engineers to really see how they did their work and gave them the perspective of a lawyer to help them understand how to make the product even better. Just an amazing experience. And that led to where I am now with being the legal AI strategist and a lawyer for this startup boutique law firm, high growth law firm that's really focused on an important niche practice and supporting really small business owners, which is a great opportunity and an area where we really need to figure out how to deliver high quality and efficient legal services for folks who, especially by the time that they're at a dispute with their franchisor, their financial status might not be so great, might not be as great as it was when they started off. Maybe when they engaged us on the transactional side to get things set up for them, just things might have happened where they're in need of legal services, but they might not have, the types of resources that larger companies would have just by nature of their experience over time with the franchise.
So one thing I want to do with the time we have left, I do want to pay off the teaser for everyone watching that we set up at the beginning about your experience with, I believe it was Gemini Pro 2.5, right? And
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting into the weeds a little bit because, like you do a great job of kind of, let's call it building in public where you show how you've experimented with stuff and you post that on LinkedIn and give everyone the benefit of that, lesson learned there. So what was the lesson learned with 2.5? You said that it was something that threw you for a loop. What was that?
Yeah. So Google Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental, that's the model that just got released. I think was it last week? Everything's a time meld now, a time fog, right? It was a week or two ago that this model was released by the Google team. And I've tried stuff with Gemini in the past and honestly hadn't been very impressed. But ever since they came out with Notebook LM, I've been paying more attention because Notebook LM is a really great product. When this 2.5 experimental came out, I toyed around with it a little bit and then decided to bring it in and be my assistant on a project that I'm working on. I can't really get too much into the details, but just thinking about the generality of it, think about having an LLM, an AI model, reviewing a very long document, 200-page legal document, and being able to pick out the needles in the haystack from that in a kind of chat interface. So the user says, hey, tell me about this in this super long document with tons of words in it, tons of context, and it's legalese. Tell me about this thing. Well, Gemini, I asked it a question. Gemini read the entire thing, not only answered my question, but pointed out an inconsistency between one part of this super long document and another part of the super long document. And that physically, I was looking at my screen just like this, and I physically doubled over because I couldn't believe at what it did. And of course, first, like I'm one thing I'm known for on LinkedIn is the check your sites thing when it comes to the the fake cases and all of that. Well, I went and checked my sites. I went to the source document, and indeed, that inconsistency existed there. And I do not know if any human lawyer, unless it was their job to check for that inconsistency, just given the amount of words between those two sections, I don't know if any human lawyer would have caught it.
And
And
about how long did that take to get that?
I think it was Gemini gives in Google AI Studio, it gives the time that it runs through a process. I think it was like 90 seconds that it caught that and answered the question that I had initially asked it for. That this is like folks, I think, still think of early days ChatGPT as what AI is now. They're thinking of the tool that Stephen Schwartz used to become the ChatGPT lawyer, the Avianca case. And the technology, AI has advanced so much in that short amount of time. That was the summer of 2023. We're coming up sort of on summer 2025. So let's say it was a year and a half ago. The amount of growth that the technology has had in the past year and a half is literally exponential. And unfortunately, I think our profession has been, I wouldn't say linear or flat. We've had some growth, but we're not caught up to the technology. Something that I pointed out with an article that I posted about this deep research technology is that the technology is now advancing to the point where it's making up for our own shortcomings, our own inability to check our sites. If Stephen Schwartz had the benefit of being able to use deep research technology, then he might not have been caught up in hallucinated cases. And so I think it behooves us to really think about how we can bring this tech into our work, because our work is so nuanced, it's so sophisticated. The complex stuff is very complex, but the technology is growing to be able to meet that. I'm seeing it with my own eyes, my own experience, and my own physical reaction to what the tech is doing now. And it's not going to stop. Even if it did stop, even if it plateaued now, whatever we can do with this 2.5 Pro, it's unbelievable. But it's only going to get better.
Yeah, as you know, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And it's only going to get better. And so that's kind of hard to see, like, 5, 10 years out, what that new world is going to be like. But it's definitely going to be quite a bit different than it is right now.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It's even hard to see like 5 weeks out. Don't know what's on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, let me ask you a couple of questions that I ask everyone that I
Okay.
because we all have quite a bit going on and we're somewhat type A. I like to ask people, and I'll ask you, like, how do you keep all of this up in the air? Like you have all these different interests, and even sharing everything that you do on LinkedIn. Like, how do you manage to balance it all out, or is there a balance?
Partner that I worked with at Reed Smith in DC, Scott Bolden, he framed it this way. He has twin daughters who are very successful, and he's been a supporter of them. I have twins as well, boy girl twins who are 10 years old, and very busy kids. And so Scott's framing to me years ago when my family was very young is that don't think of it as work-life balance. Think of it as the juggle. You just have these balls that you need to be able to all keep up, and you need to prioritize based off of, if you think of juggling, which ball is going to be falling. You need to just prioritize what and constantly shift those priorities based off of what is most important. So the way that I achieve that is I have an amazing partner, my wife, Sarah. Um, and unfortunately, we have another ball in the air right now because she had a ski injury. She had
Oh,
surgery to repair a torn hamstring. And so she's just a little bit physically hobbled a little bit. So, in soccer terms, we're playing a man down right now, which means that I have one more ball that I'm trying to keep up, or maybe multiple more balls that I'm trying to keep up. There are trade-offs for that. So I'm not exercising the way that I want to. I'm not sleeping as much as I want to, but I'm getting other important things done and hopefully providing a good life for my kids, which is my top priority. So that's the ball that we're always making sure to keep up here. Most definitely.
well, first off, I hope she gets well soon.
Thank you. Thank you. We're having
And
good progress so far.
that's good because I know that life, it's always a challenge. There's always another ball that you have to add to the juggle. And the last question that I want to ask you is how, and you already answered that, but what makes it
Okay.
all worthwhile for you? Like at the end of the day, after juggling all everything, and the work that you do, sharing the learnings that you have with everyone and your kids, what what makes it worthwhile? What gives you that sense of satisfaction?
Especially now with this technology, AI, legal AI, I'm satisfied because I'm feeding this inner kid inside of me. Growing up, I was a Star Wars kid, being an only child. And Tom, I don't know if you had imaginary friends, but I most certainly did. And they were Star Wars people. They were Luke and Leia and Han and the bots and everything, the droids and everything. And so the idea of technology being able to help people do more, fly through the stars and have space battles and cool stuff like that. Um, that's been ingrained in me since I was a kid. And now with this technology, I feel like we have our own R2D2s and C3POs that we can put to different tasks for ourselves. And so all of this is like what I'm able to do on LinkedIn, how I'm able to contribute, and my passion and excitement for legal AI itself is all driven by that inner child inside of me who's super stoked about this technology. Well, I feel like we're living in the future. We don't have the flying cars and we don't have the jetpacks that I thought we would have, but now we're starting to have droids, and it makes me very excited.
I love that. Let your inner child guide you. And
That's
yeah,
right.
for everyone that's watching and listening to this, like, how could they keep in touch with you?
LinkedIn is a great place. Kyle Bahr, B as in boy, AHR. That's the best place to be able to reach out and find me. Please send me, don't just follow, send me a connection request. Let me know in a message that you heard the interview. And I love to connect with people, learn more about other folks who are in this space, in the legal AI space, as well as other legal professionals who are interested in AI, skeptical about AI. I'm willing to take all takers and share my experiences and my knowledge and hopefully learn from other people like you, Tom. The LinkedIn community, when it comes to legal tech, I think is absolutely amazing. Some folks have talked about Twitter and X. I'm not really focused on Twitter. I kind of don't want to have to context switch so much. So I like to go to one place, and that one place where I've gotten a lot of really positive value, meaningful content is from LinkedIn.
Well, for everybody watching, I really recommend checking out Kyle and his posts. They're definitely valuable, and thank you for providing such value today and sharing your thoughts with everyone.
Most definitely. It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for the invite.
You're welcome, Kyle. Really great story, and I want to thank all of you for watching. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.